Hi, I'm Bob Flisser with Envato Tuts Plus, and I want to show you some techniques you can use for when you need to work with percentages in Microsoft Excel. I have some formulas and I have a couple of functions that I'll show you towards the end that I think you're going to find useful. Let's take a look. If you want, you can download this practice workbook from this page. You can see here it's called percentages.xlsx, or if you want, you can go and recreate it on your own. You can see it's pretty simple. We have all the months of the year. This is an expense sheet, obviously, and here we have the amounts. These amounts, I'll just click them. You can see here in the formula bar, they're just typed in, and then we have a total at the bottom, and that's just a sum function. So let's scroll down here a little bit, and here's what we're after. Let's say for next year, we think that our expenses are going to increase by 8%, and we want to know what that amount is going to be. So let's go over here into cell A18, and let's just type in with 8% increase. And I'll just press the tab key to go across to the next column. Now, because I'm typing text, because I type text in here, Excel does not treat that 8% like an actual number. It just treats it like text and it won't try to do any calculations on it. In general, though, when you put a percentage in a cell, you have a choice. You can actually type the percentage. So if you wanted 8%, you could type 8 and a percent sign. If you're more comfortable with using decimals and you want to type 0.08 or 0.08, Excel will treat them all the same. That's as far as calculations go. As far as formatting goes, if you type in the percent sign, Excel will automatically format it as percent. We'll get to formatting in a little bit. So all we want to do here for that 8% increase is we'll start off with an equal sign, right? Because every formula has to start off with an equal sign. So we're going to say equals that total times, and here's where you have the choice. We can say 108%, or if you want, you can say times 1.08. That's all there is to it. Press enter, and now we can see how much those expenses will be if they're 8% higher. But let's say we think the expenses are going to decrease by 8%. So let's go here into A19 and we'll say with 8%, and I can just edit this here, so I don't have to do all the typing. Decrease, and again, press the tab key. And this is essentially the same thing. We can say equals the total times, and I can say either 92%, or I can say 0.92, right? Because 1 minus 8 is 0.92, and press enter, and there we go. Now you could do this with a little bit more flexibility, because let's say instead of 8%, maybe you're thinking of 7% or 9% or something like that, and you just want to substitute some numbers. Let me just make column C a little wider, and we can do these right next to the existing ones. So I'll just click in here, and I'll say equals that same B17 plus what? Plus 8% of that. So I can say that times 0.08. And the reason I'm doing it this way is it'll be a lot easier later on to simply substitute that 0.08 with 0.07 or 0.09 or whatever, and enter. And we have the same number. I'll just get rid of those decimals. I'll click here. Actually, I'll select both of these cells. And over here, see, I'm on the Home tab of the ribbon bar, and I'll click this one a couple of times to remove the decimal. So you see, the result is the same, but this is just a little bit more flexible. This one also is going to be essentially the same concept, so we can say equals that B17 minus B17 times 0.08. Also, I don't have to worry about this formula being done in a wrong order. I don't need parentheses because multiplication is always going to be done before the subtraction. And again, we have the same number, just a different, maybe a little more flexible technique. Now, these are the increases and decreases, but what if you just want to know what is the 8% itself? So let's just go in here to cell A20, and I'll just put in 8% of total, hit the tab key, and this is even more simple. I can say equals that B17 times, and maybe this time instead of a decimal, I'll type 8%. And I've got that number, and again, if you want, you can remove those decimals. Okay, speaking of flexibility, let me show you how you could make this even more flexible. Now let's go down here into cell A22, and let's type the word adjustment. And this way we can maybe make these percentages higher or lower a lot easier without having to edit the formulas. And let's go over here and we'll say higher total, hit the enter key, and we'll type lower total. And let's go over here to the adjustment, and there's our original 8%. So you can just type in literally 8%. This way we don't have to hard code any numbers in the formula. We can say equals that same B17 plus that B17 times this adjustment number. Actually, again, let's select these and get rid of those decimals. And in here, we'll do essentially the same thing we did above. We can say equals that B17 times. And here we do need parenthesis because we want to do subtraction before multiplication. So let's open up the parenthesis and we'll say 100% minus that percent, close the parenthesis. And now we have our number. Okay, so these numbers all look the same, and you might wonder, well, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, this way, if I take that 8% and I change it to 7%, boom, immediately we see the numbers, or 9%, whatever the percentage you want. You can simply change it right there on the worksheet, and you don't have to worry about editing the formula itself. Now, if you had typed this in as a decimal instead of a percent, you can format it as a percent by clicking this percent style button right there on the ribbon bar. You could also use the shortcut, which is Control-Shift-%. That's in Windows, or if you're on the Mac, you can press Command-Shift-%. It's the same thing. Okay, now let me show you how to do a percentage change. Let's scroll up here. And what I mean by percentage change is, what is the percent that these numbers change from January to February, from February to March, and so on. So let's put a column title up here. And kind of an easy way to do it is if you click on this amount, put your mouse pointer over there on the autofill dot so you get that crosshair, just drag across. So that way you get the formatting, and now we can just type in something like percent change. And now if you want, maybe center them, whatever you like. Now, in case you're not familiar, let me give you the general formula for doing a percentage change. This is whether you're using Excel or pencil and paper. You simply say the new value minus the old value and take that whole thing and divide it by the new value and then make it look like a percentage. Now, there is no percentage change for January because it's the first month, so the first percentage change we'll have is from January to February. So let's go over here to C5 and let's say equals. And now we got to open up the parenthesis, and we'll say B5 minus B4, close the parenthesis, divided by B5. And I'm going to press Control-Enter. You could press Command-Enter if you're using the Mac. And that gives us a decimal. We want this to look like percents. So let's just select all of these cells here. And again, you could press Control-Shift percent or Command-Shift% or just click that. There we go. And now let's autofill it. Put your mouse pointer on that autofill dot, and you can click and drag down to the bottom, or you can double click. And now you can see the percentage change from one month to the next. The last calculation we want to do on this sheet is a percent of total. Again, if you want, maybe make this column wider, and let's fill across that. And let's make this a title of percent of total. And here's what I mean by percent of total, if you're not familiar. Each of these amounts contributes to the total. Now that total, that 66,000, that's 100%. So what are the component percents? And in theory, these should all add up to 100%. And that's just a simple calculation. You take each month and divide by the grand total and make it a percent. But we got to make sure that we use an absolute reference in the denominator, otherwise the numbers are going to go wacky. Well, let's take a look. So let's say equals January divided by the total. And let's press Control-Enter or Command-Enter on the Mac so we could enter and stay in place on that cell. Let's format it as a percentage. And here, maybe if you want, you can maybe increase the decimal so we can see that January is 9.2% of the grand total. But you don't want to leave it like this, because if you autofill it, you're going to start getting just all kinds of garbage. So let's just delete the whole thing, and we'll say equals, again, January divided by the grand total, but don't enter it yet. You want to press the F4 key, or if you're on the Mac, you want to press the function F4. That puts dollar signs here in the denominator. So $B means stay fixed on column B. $17 means stay fixed on row 17. So $B, $17 means stay fixed on that cell B17. Don't veer off it. Now again, I'll Control Enter, and let's drag down to the bottom. And here we've got a blank row. We can delete that. So now we can see the component percentage of each month as a percentage of the grand total. And of course, the grand total is 100%. Okay, now the last thing I want to show you here in this tutorial is how to group percentages. So we're done here on the expenses worksheet of this workbook. So let's go over here to the grades worksheet. And you can see we have two columns. We have GPA of, these are people's grades going from the lowest grade up to the highest grade. And then we have a column for rank. And here's what this is all about. Ranking numbers by percentage is a statistical technique. And you might remember when you were in school, when all of the students were ranked according to what their grades were from lowest to highest, you had a percentile. And you were told, okay, you're in this percentile or you're in that percentile. And the higher the grade you had, the higher the percentile you had, and the greater your bragging rights. So Excel has two pairs of functions that let you do this. Now there's one pair that will find that rank, it'll find that percentile when you give it one of the numbers that are in this list. And Excel calls this an array, just for purposes of reading the documentation. The other pair of formulas works in the reverse. You tell it what the percentile number is you're looking for, and it will tell you what that grade point average has to be. Why are there two pairs of functions and not just two functions? Well, in each pair, the functions are kind of similar. One of them will include the first number in the array and the last number in the array, and the other function will not include the first and last number in the array. So let's start first with the function that will read the grade point average and tell you what that percentile, what that percent rank is. And to do that, we use the percent rank function. Let me give you the syntax. The syntax is simply equals %rank.inc, and there are two arguments that we pass it. One is the array, and that's that, in this case, what we're doing is that whole column of grade point averages. And the second argument is each individual grade point average. So I was explaining before the difference between the two functions in each pair. So this %rank.inc, inc means include. In other words, include the first and last grade point averages in the array. If for whatever reason you want to exclude the first and the last one, then you would say %rank.exe for exclude. So let's go do that. Let's make sure we're clicked here in C3. So we say equals %, and you can see here are the functions that we're looking for. So we want to choose %rank.inc. You could click it or you can type it in, whatever you like, I'll double click it. So the first thing we want to put in is the array. So we'll select the first one. You can, if you want, you can click and drag down, or you can click the first one and shift click the last, whatever you prefer. So we have these in there. Now, like before, we want to make sure that this is an absolute reference because we're going to do an autofill. So press the F4 key, or if you're on a Mac, function F4. So this makes this whole thing a relative reference. By the way, if you're familiar with range names, you could give this whole column a range name, but we're not going to go into that right now. So we say comma, and choose that first entry, close a parenthesis, and I will Control Enter or Command Enter, and now get the autofill dot and double click. Let's make these percentages, so click the % button. And now you can see the person at the lowest grade, they're in the zero percentile, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and as you scroll down, you have higher numbers. So if you had a 4.0 grade point average, congratulations, you're in the 100th percentile. or if you had a GPA of 3.92, you're in the 88th percentile. So this is great, but sometimes you might want to do this in reverse. For example, let's say you're one of these students and you're applying for an internship, and you're told that to get this internship, you have to be in at least the 60th percentile. But when you look on this list, you can see there is no 60. There's a 59 and there's a 62. How do you know what's the 60th? So let's go down here to the bottom and let's just click in here. Maybe make this column a little wider if we need to. And let's type in 60th percentile and press the tab key. Still need to make this a little wider. So to solve this problem, we use the percentile function. So the syntax of the percentile function is we say equals percentile.inc. So remember that .inc means include the first and last numbers of that list. And then we pass it the array. There's two arguments. The first argument is the array, and the second argument is the percent rank we're looking for. Now, in this particular case, we aren't going to do an autofill, so you don't have to make that array an absolute reference. You can if you want, but it's just more work than you need to do. So let's make sure we're over here in cell B39, and we say equals percentile, and there's that percentile.inc. I'll just double click that. So the array is the same. So this time, instead of clicking and dragging, I'll use a different technique. I'll click the first one, scroll down, shift click the last one. Again, as I said, we don't have to make this an absolute reference because we aren't autofilling it, comma, and the second argument is the 60%. So again, you can type in 0.6, or I'll make this a little more obvious by typing 60 and the percent sign, close a parenthesis, enter it. So I know that a GPA in this case of 3.2, let's just get rid of one of those decimal places, 3.23 is the 60th percentile. And if we scroll up here, we can say, all right, 3.22 is the 59th, and 3.25 is the 62nd. So yeah, it makes sense if you just eyeball it that 3.23 is the 60th percentile. So you can see Excel has some really great tools, some really great features for working with percentages. One thing you should remember is the order of operations. So what gets first priority is parenthesis, second priority is exponents, followed by multiplication, division, and subtraction. And speaking of school, you may remember from way back in your school days, I always remember this with the mnemonic, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So once again, my name is Bob Flisser for Envato Tuts Plus. I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you next time.